The bar on the outskirts of the city was shrouded in a yellow haze, reminiscent of old gasoline smoke, where the clinking of glasses echoed like rhythmic knocks on worn wooden tables. The door burst open, a cold gust sweeping in with the smell of leather, sweat, and cigarettes. Men in leather jackets, helmets hanging from their elbows, walked in as if this were their territory. Grace stood behind the counter, her white shirt buttoned to the collar, hair tied neatly, her eyes calm like a lake at midnight. She poured the beer, slid the glass toward the customer a heartbeat ahead, just in time to dodge a rough shout behind her. A shrill whistle cut through the noise. The tallest man, with a snake tattoo coiling around his arm, leaned over the counter. "Hey, sweetheart, give me a smile." Grace didn't answer. She kept working. Moving from the tap to the register, her steps quick and steady like a song rehearsed too many times. The whole bar seemed to shrink under the man's brooding stare. Then, amid the roaring laughter, he grabbed her collar and yanked hard. A seam popped. The sound of tearing fabric cracked through the air thick with alcohol. The entire room gasped at once, and the music suddenly became meaningless background noise. Silence swept across the room like headlights slicing through a dark road. Grace stood upright, her breath steady, the torn fabric revealing the lines of an old tattoo. Black, sharp, and out of place in this night. Faces that moments ago were half-drunk and mocking suddenly froze. In a room accustomed to noise and swagger, another kind of weight had arrived. The weight of truth. Grace, 32, worked the night shift at a roadside bar, a place where she knew which chair wobbled, which bulb flickered, and which regular preferred bourbon over lager. She rented a small room on the second floor of a red brick house 3 blocks away, where the window faced a parking lot and a row of withered maples. Every time before going to bed, she brewed a weak pot of coffee, turned on the radio low, and wrote a few lines in a worn black notebook. No one at the bar knew about that notebook, just as no one knew her past. At 18, Grace left her hometown with an empty backpack and a promise to return when she had money. She enlisted, not for glory, but for escape. In the military, she learned how to run through nights in wet boots, how to stay calm through explosions, and how to bandage others before thinking of herself. There were mornings when the desert opened up like a sheet of steel, and nights when she memorized her friends' names like a prayer. When she came back, she spoke less, but her hands remained steady, her eyes quieter. The only thing left on her skin was the tattoo. Not something to show off. It was a private reminder that what she'd lived through couldn't be washed away with soap. At the bar, she was a good listener. She remembered who had just divorced, who got a new job, and who lied about quitting drinking. Sometimes she'd add an extra plate of fries for a truck driver short on cash, or leave a sandwich on the back doorstep for the homeless man who slept on the stairs. Small gestures, like little stitches holding the fabric of life from tearing apart. That night, when the group of bikers stormed in, the rhythm of the bar changed, like a heartbeat squeezed tight. The laughter turned coarse, the music was demanded louder, and a chair fell over, making the wooden floor tremble like thunder indoors. Grace, though used to noise, could feel the prickle of aggression spreading. The tall one, the same man who whistled, began his show by ordering drinks like commands. When she set 3 glasses on the table, he tipped one on purpose, letting the foam spill across the tray. "Clumsy, aren't you?" he said, and his friends howled. A middle-aged man behind the counter, Al, the owner, shot a warning glance. But Al had learned to settle chaos with a smile. On nights like this, he chose peace to avoid trouble, with the police, the license, or broken furniture. The whole bar, like one big body, learned to breathe shallow when the predators lingered. Two young waitresses slipped quietly toward the kitchen. Grace didn't. She kept working, setting receipts neatly, avoiding the deliberate brushes against her wrist. Things slid quickly downhill. The tattooed man started throwing insults, asking who protected her, mocking her calm, pretending surprise that someone like her dared to stand tall in silence. His words scattered across the table like shards of broken glass. The others looked away, or laughed to stay safe, or stared into their phones as if to hide. Cruelty often begins with one person, but complicity fills the room. The man reached out, grabbed Grace's collar, and yanked as if testing his strength. The rip wasn't long, but it tore through the thin peace of the night. A broken laugh, a half-finished gasp. Grace felt the chill brush her skin, but colder still were the eyes that turned toward her. She stood straight. She didn't cross her arms, didn't run. Her eyes were dark like a porch at midnight, a place where someone could finally stop trembling. She knew if she bowed her head, she'd lose what the military had taught her best. Dignity is the posture of the soul. The light from behind the counter hit the exposed skin, revealing a tattoo etched like a metal seal, an eagle with spread wings, a globe, an anchor, 3 symbols forming the emblem that no Marine would ever mistake. Grace didn't look down. She looked straight at the man before her, as if staring past him to a place far away, where friends had fallen on dusty hills, where she had learned to listen to her own heartbeat beneath the roar of war. The noise in the bar was sliced apart by an invisible blade. Hands holding glasses froze mid-air. The man who tore her shirt, once grinning, recoiled as if touching red-hot steel. His eyes darted. In that moment, the woman before him was no longer a waitress. She was someone who had walked through places he couldn't even imagine. Grace said nothing. Her silence had sounded this time, the echo of boots on concrete, the creak of a backpack strap, a commander's voice saying, "Move out," through a salty wind. Al stepped out from behind the counter, laid his towel down, and stood beside Grace. He didn't touch her, only stood close enough for the man to understand a new boundary had been drawn. From the corner, an old man in a faded cap bearing the letters USMC nodded. He placed a hand on his chest, then lowered it. A silent salute only 2 people understood. A young woman in the kitchen bit her lip, her eyes glassy with fear and awe. The tattooed man tried to joke, but his words caught in his throat. I didn't know," he muttered, his voice suddenly small. Grace stayed composed. She straightened the torn fabric, as if buttoning a uniform for a flag ceremony, then slid a glass of whiskey toward him. "Here you go," she said evenly, loud enough for everyone to hear. Not defiance, not trembling, just a simple sentence that landed like an anchor dropped to the floor. For a long moment, no one breathed. Then, the man in the old cap spoke. "Semper Fi." The words hit the wooden floor like a verdict. The tattooed man swallowed hard and stepped back. He dropped his hand from the counter, turned to his friends, and was suddenly lost in his own footsteps. No one cheered. The music seemed quieter. Or maybe people were hearing something else now. The sound of respect taking form. Grace fastened the remaining button, walked back behind the counter. She didn't yell, didn't demand an apology. The room followed her with its eyes. Not for the tear in her shirt, but for the calm grace of someone who had just walked through fire. Behind the silence lingered a lesson no one had to explain. There are things that cannot be torn. Will, dignity, and the history of a soul. After that moment, the rhythm of the night changed. Al placed a thin jacket over Grace's shoulders. She nodded in thanks. The old man in the cap paid his tab and scribbled a note on the receipt. For her shift. A young couple pulled their chairs closer, asked if she was okay, then offered to call her a cab after work. Those who had avoided her gaze earlier now asked small, clumsy questions, but they meant well. Indifference ebbed away like a receding tide, leaving behind the warm sand of kindness. The tattooed man didn't wait to be told to leave. He backed out, taking his two silent friends with him. The door closed without a slam. Only the wind chime at the porch tinkled softly, like forgiveness drifting through the air. Al returned to the counter, wiped the spilled beer, and looked at Grace. "If you want to rest, you can go home," he said. Grace shook her head. "I'll finish my shift." That answer made everyone present find, somewhere inside themselves, a small spark of respect. In the days that followed, the story spread, not as gossip, but as admiration. A few regulars brought her a new white shirt, neatly wrapped in brown paper. Someone sent a handwritten note. "Thank you for standing tall." A local veterans group heard about it and stopped by, leaving a card with information about counseling services for ex-soldiers. They told Al that if any of his staff ever needed to talk, the door was open. Grace accepted the card, tucked it into her black notebook. She knew some battles don't end in one night. Kindness soon became visible in little ways. The young waitress learned to say no when someone crossed the line. Al fixed the loose back door lock and installed a light over the parking lot. The homeless man on the steps got a warm coat. Grace stayed punctual, steady, still pouring beers and keeping a glass of water ready for anyone who walked in with tired eyes. In that bar, once thought to be all grit and noise, something soft had finally found its place. Grace's story reminds us that strength isn't always a roar. It's often the quiet knowing of who we are. Kindness isn't a shining cloak. It's the small stitches that keep the fabric of life from tearing. A room can fall silent out of fear, but it can also fall silent out of respect when someone stands tall with dignity. And amid invisible battles, loss, trauma, loneliness, kindness becomes the chair where the weary can rest. We never know what someone beside us has been through. A tattoo can be an emblem or a prayer. A glass of water placed at the right moment, a support card offered with gentle eyes, a jacket laid softly over a shoulder. These things may not change the world instantly, but they can change the course of a night, a room, a heart. When kindness appears, violence doesn't need to be defeated. It simply doesn't belong. If you believe kindness is the quiet strength that keeps us standing through the storm, like and subscribe to Join Kindness Stories 365. Share this story with someone who needs to hear that dignity can never be torn away. And in the comments, tell us about a moment when you witnessed kindness change the atmosphere of an entire room. Your story might be the chair someone needs to sit down tonight and breathe a little easier.